Hi everybody, it's Peter Zellum's Griniflix Adventure 8. Welcome to another video. Today's video is about 2x converters for your camera. I've been doing this research for over 40 years, can you believe it? The first 2x adapter that I bought is this, the Vivitar 2x adapter, 2x converter, and that was for the old Nikon manual lenses like this one here. It's a 135 f2.8. All of a sudden that becomes 270. I've got the ZF here, also I've got a Z9. I've got my 100 to 400 Nikkor Z lens, and yes, I have forked out on another Tele converter, a 2x Tele converter, and this is for the Z lens, Nikkor Z 2x converter. And then this is the old F-mount 2x converter, a Vivitar one. Some aspects they are similar. They do have a lens there for the conversion, but I think there's a lot more glass in this new modern version as well. However, the downside of teleconverter lenses is that you can lose quality in the image, you lose a lot of light, and therefore it changes the shutter speed you can use, or the ISO of the film, or the digital sensor that you're using as well. However, the option is, instead of using a 2x converter, is just to shoot normally with whatever lens you have and then crop in post-processing. So the question is, are 2x converters still a waste of time? Well, that's what this video is about. Alright, well, let's fit this converter onto the Nikkor ZF. The teleconverter has two covers, one that says be careful because on this teleconverter, there's a switch there so you can take that cover off. It does protrude there. So this is only compatible with certain Z lenses, so you've got to make sure that you have the right lens, do your research and find out which one it is that can accept a 2x converter or the 1.4x converter. You can see with the 100-400 lens, there's quite a large cavity inside there, and it's that part that actually goes in there. And voila, now we've got the converter on the lens. So the downside of using converters is that yes, you extend the focal length, but you also reduce the amount of light that actually reaches the sensor. Oh, just a quick note while you're watching this video, I'm not sure whether you knew, but I'm associated with a number of companies, and those companies can provide discounts to my viewers and subscribers. So all you need to do is go to adventure8.com.au, just click on the website. Yes, just go shop discounts and you find all the different companies that I'm associated with. So for example, SwiftX, so you can set up a crypto exchange and get $10 worth of free Bitcoin. iTECHWORLD for camping, lithium batteries, backup systems for your home. REDTIGER for dash cams, BOUNUS electric bikes, and all sorts of different discount levels are available, and there are discount codes associated with each one of those, whether it be Adventure 8 or something else. So just go to the website. Hope you can take advantage of the discounts, and back to the video. A factor of 4, which is 2 f-stops, or you have to slow down the shutter speed by a factor of 4. So if you're shooting normally at 1/400th of a second, at whatever aperture and ISO you're using, then when you put on the converter, to get the same amount of light through, instead of being 1/400th of a second, you have to go down to half, which is 1/200th, and again another half, so a factor of 4, down to 1/100th of a second. You've got a choice of either varying the aperture or the ISO or the shutter speed to change your lighting conditions. Put this on. Okay. Alright, and voila. So with the converter on now, you can see we've still got a fairly compact camera, and we can zoom out right to, in this case here, the lens now becomes a 200 to 800 millimeter focal length, which is pretty good. So from a compactness point of view, it's great. Being a full frame lens means I could actually photograph in DX mode, so like a crop sensor. Becomes equivalent to 1200 millimeter. So now this sensor is 24 megapixel. If I was using the Z9, it's 45 megapixel. As you've probably seen from some of my videos, I'm not really concerned about megapixels these days. 24 is heaps. If you've got more than that, that's also great. I do spend quite a bit of time on the beach, and therefore I like to do surf photography, and having that extra range and reach helps me sort of really focus onto the subject and obviously, yeah, and get some great shots hopefully. However, the option is, instead of using a 2x converter, is just to shoot normally with whatever lens you have and then crop in post-processing. Because you've got so many megapixels with these cameras these days that there's enough detail there to be able to crop down. I've set up a rig in my backyard and set up some charts and a mannequin so that I could photograph and see exactly what quality changes there are in the different scenarios. I was using a tripod so I could minimize camera shake, and so also I could shoot at much slower shutter speeds to see exactly what the difference is, whether the ISO is an issue, or whether it's the shutter speed that's the issue, or the aperture that's the issue when you're comparing using a 2x converter or not. Let's bump into Lightroom and have a look at some of these test photos and see whether we can make any conclusions from this. Right, so all those photographs you just saw were taken with the 100 to 400 millimeter zoom with the 2x teleconverter attached. And all those shots were done at 800 millimeter focal length, which means the minimum aperture that you can get is f11. They were actually all handheld as well, so shutter speeds did vary quite considerably, and therefore I was able to adjust the ISO accordingly. So for example, these first two shots at 1/80th of a second, 1/15th of a second, and then bumped it up to 1/800th of a second, and then the ISO went up to 9000. You're able to see the difference in the quality, possibly, but then again on computer screens and TVs you probably can't see the difference. Then I took a whole bunch more photographs where I set up the tripod and set up my charts and the mannequins, and we can have a look at those in greater detail also now. I've got two shots here. So one is 400 focal length, and the other one is the 400 with a 2x converter, so 800 focal length. I did shoot the 400 at f10 to get some reference with regards to shooting similar aperture and see what happens. I think what you notice straight away is the depth of field is quite different. Shooting 400 at f10 and then cropping, which is what this photograph is, you can see that the depth of field is greater. So these tiles in the foreground have more detail, whereas with the lens, the 400mm lens wide open at 5.6, with a 2x converter then goes to f11. So the depth of field is compressed. If I was shooting this at 5.6, I think it would be similar depth of field. Let's zoom in and have a closer look. So I'm in at 400%. So things that you notice straight away is when you crop, then you do bring up the noise or the grain in the photograph more so. Whereas using the telephoto lens with the 2x converter, a bit of a cleaner image. Having said that, the contrast is different. As soon as you put on the 2x converter, I think you do lose a slight amount of contrast. But then you might pick up a little bit in definition using the 2x converter compared to just cropping. So here you can see the slats in the window. There you can see the slats in the window, which is a clearer shot. I'm not entirely sure. Again, we're pixel peeping at 400%. So reality is you wouldn't do this, and therefore you wouldn't notice any difference. Which has a better image? Look, it's hard to say. I think they're much the same. Possibly the 800 is a little bit better than 400 cropped and then resized. Hard to say. So if we look at the crane in the background, where's the crane there? Yeah, so I think the depth of field is a bit better because I stopped this one down to f10, the 400. So I've set up the camera on the tripod and in my backyard and at 400mm, and then cropped to give me the same frame size as 400mm plus teleconverter at 800mm. So if we zoom in at 400% at down Danielle, I think there's a little bit more contrast in the 400 cropped. Hard to say, to tell you the truth, but you can see that again because the 800 is not cropped, and in both cases I'm shooting 64 ISO. You do notice more noise in the cropped version, whereas you get a cleaner image with the teleconverter. Do you have as much detail? Pretty much. Yeah, there's a little bit of difference in editing, and my lighting did change during the course of this shoot because it was overcast and then the sun came out a little bit. Let's have a look here. 800, is it a bit sharper than the 400 cropped? Possibly, hard to tell the difference. Look at these fine lines. Okay, on the 800 you can see the fine lines there. Possibly a bit better than on the 400 cropped. And then what else? This little chart here, there's one in the background there, one in the foreground, and the main chart is in the middle there. The point of this was just to see how the depth of field changed when you went from 5.6 to f11 with the teleconverter. So that's 5.6 and that's f11. So if we look at the chart that's in front of this main chart, so the focus point was this main chart. And yeah, so if we zoom right in, you can see that the depth of field is pretty much identical in both cases, whether you're using 5.6 on the 400 cropped or the 800 with teleconverter at f11. So you get a similar image both in depth of field, but the compensation you have to make is in the shutter speed, because we're shooting 1/50th of a second there, again with changing lighting conditions, and there we've gone down to 1/13th of a second. So that's slow down the shutter speed to give 4 times more light to get a similar shot. Then if we go to the image, to the chart that's in the background, you can see that both are very similar as well. Okay, so that's a conclusion. So even though when you do lose 2 f-stops of light, and the number does change from 5.6 to f11, the actual depth of field is exactly the same. The quality of the 2x converter is really good. So even there close to the edges here, it's basically on par, almost exactly the same as the 400 by itself cropped. Okay, so those other comparisons were on the Z9. Now doing this same comparison with the ZF, so 24 megapixel camera. 2x converter on the right here, and just the 400mm cropped. And let's have a look at a closer look. See what we can see at 400%. Cropped, you start losing some of the fine lines. With the 2x converter, you can still see those fine lines there. And you can see how the lines start to join up with the cropped view. 1/30th of a second. And then with the 800 with 400 with teleconverter at 800, I'm shooting at 1/8 of a second. The side here, let's see what's happening towards the side. Look, the details are pretty good with the 2x converter. So this is right pretty close to the side. Yeah, so you can see again, because with the 400 cropped, we're getting a bit more noise in the image compared to really solid blacks here on the 800. Yes, well, the images are quite similar. So that's at 400%. I was keen to try out the old Vivitar 2x converter. So I've got my Nikon Z9, and using the F to Z adapter, I put on the 70 to 200 f mount lens, f2.8, with the 2x adapter. So this one here, the 200, is then cropped to be the same frame as the 800. Now it's on the other one here. This is where I've actually used the 2x converter, but I forgot to change the metadata in the camera to tell it what I was using. Just we accept this as being the 70 to 200 lens with the Vivitar 2x converter, and then cropped to give me that 800 perspective. So let's have a look at those two side by side and see how they compare. Obviously from this point of view, they look pretty close to each other. When we zoom in 400%, let's see what happens. Well, this is starting to become really quite interesting. So the actual Vivitar, the old Vivitar 2x teleconverter, is actually doing a really good job. What else can we notice here? If we go to the out of focus areas here, this is also interesting. Again, with the 200 with the severe cropping, I'm getting some unusual effects. So where these straight lines here and here, the pixels are starting to overlap, and they're starting to look like right angle lines rather than just straight lines. And if we look at the back one there, you also notice it here. We've got straight lines there with the 2x converter, And here with the 200 lens cropped severely, we've got those lines starting to break down because obviously we've got a much wider shot that had to be cropped severely to get the image, which sort of implies that the 2x converter does actually provide an advantage both in giving you finer detail. The contrast usually does change, and then depending on how good the Tele converter also is, you might have some drop off as you go towards the corners and edges. So here you probably notice it in the eyes with the 200 cropped. We've got lots of definition as soon as we put on the old Vivitar Tele converter. We've got some definition that's lost towards the corners. All right, well, let's compare converters. The new Z 2x converter on the 100 to 400 lens versus the Vivitar on the 70 to 200, and let's see how that looks. Okay, so we've got the 800mm lens, 100 to 400 with the 2x converter on it, the Z on the left, and we've got the F-mount lens that's 70 to 200. Forget about what it says here. 7200 with a 2x converter, the Vivitar 2x converter. Straight away, even just from these two images where even zooming in, you can see that we've got more contrast with the Z setup. So that's giving me a much better image. The depth of field seems to be much the same with the bokeh at the back and also the bokeh at the front. Let's zoom in and see what we got. So where am I zooming? I'm zooming into the center of the photograph here. And you can see with the Z image, we're getting a much better image than the 200 with the Vivitar 2x converter plus crop to give me the 800 focal length image. So yeah, it's not a fair comparison, but it gives me some reference. So again here, because we have cropped the image, and it was at 64 ISO, we're seeing that there is more noise in the image. The 2x converter on the 400 lens, it's bringing up lots of detail. If we go to the very edges here, you can see with a Vivitar 2x converter, it does lose detail. When we go to the eyes, you can see quite a bit in the eyes as well. But otherwise, the old Vivitar lens 2x converter does actually a pretty good job under the circumstances. I think I've proved to myself that the 2x converter does have a place in my camera gear. And I'm glad I did have my old Vivitar 2x converter as a comparison as well. And without a doubt, with the new Z system, the quality of the lenses plus the quality of the 2x converter, it does produce a wonderful image. The good thing to know is that you do get almost on par image just by cropping as well, particularly if you're using the Z9, say 45 megapixels, then you got lots of scope for cropping as well. Is a 2x converter a good idea? A lot of people still say it isn't. I think after 40 years of research from the very earliest one, from the very earliest one that I got, the Vivitar. I've also had the Tamron 2x converter, which I had for the 150 to 600 lens. And I did notice that the quality dropped off quite a bit. That lens was a F-mount lens for the Nikon and for my old DSLR. So as soon as you put on the 2x converter on that Tamron lens, because there was a 6.3, I think, went up to about f13 or f14 or something like that, then the autofocus wouldn't work. When I upgraded to the Nikkor Z series, and particularly the Z9, I was able to use the Tamron lens and the 2x converter on the Z9, and because of the much advanced autofocus system, I could actually do autofocus. So that put new life into that lens on the Z camera. However, I still wasn't happy with the quality of the image I was getting with the 2x converter. I found it again better just to crop the normal lens photograph in post-processing. I think that's still true, because as soon as you put on a 2x converter, you reduce the shutter speed you can use for the same f-stop and ISO, and that introduces camera shake, or you bump up the ISO, which means you lose some of that quality. I think probably the main advantage, particularly with this modern lens and the modern 2x converter for the Z series, is that when you are looking through the viewfinder, you can see exactly what you're photographing and what's in the frame and what's not in the frame. So I guess that's the main advantage of using a 2x converter. You see the end result in the viewfinder. Whether the autofocus works actually better, because you've now got more of the subject in the viewfinder than it is when you're not using a 2x converter, I'm not entirely sure. Possibly. And so that's possibly one advantage. But I think probably from a handling perspective, not considering the shutter speed, the aperture change, the ISO change, but by having it within the viewfinder, that's probably the most advantage of actually using the 2x converter. If you're panning and doing surf photography, then you're actually better off not having the 2x converter, because then you've got more room for error in getting the subject as you're sort of panning with the action, depending on how close you are. One thing I can say, in the 40 years, the Vivitar actually still produced a pretty good result, as you saw in the photographs. But the quality has improved. With a high quality sensor, with a Tele converter, so whether you're using the Tele converter or not, you're getting a fantastic image either way. And it's really debatable whether one is better than the other as far as the end result is concerned. So, am I happy with the 2x converter? Look, so far I am. I haven't done too much work with it, but I'm planning to go take some more shots, and maybe I have to come back in another 40 years. Give you another review on this one. But I will take more shots, and I probably will give an updated video. Yeah, so the 2x converters have improved, which is great. The cameras have improved, so using a 2x converter at least doesn't cut down the image quality as much as it did in the past. The Z system seems to work really well with both the 2x converter on or off. Does that help you? Do you think you're going to buy one of these? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If it's the first time to my channel, you haven't already subscribed, then do subscribe. Press notifications. You'll be notified when the next video is out. Thanks again for watching. Look forward to seeing you on the next video. Cheers. Bye.